Hey everyone, let me just verify if I can hear myself. So yesterday we did the same stream, but I had to actually delete the video because there was no voice. I hope there's voice for this one. And let's see. Okay, perfect. So today we are actually going to learn about forms. We before this video we actually did cart, and we saw that how we can integrate cart store, and we got the cart information as well. But for cart information, we need user information as well because we have to get address and yeah, many more details regarding the user as well. So I think this is the best time to like start working with forms because we need login form. We may need a profile like where user can see all the information about them, and we'll be still using the API HNS. So I mean, in case you're joining today, we are using this fake story API for all the different screens which we are integrating, and there are enough information. For example, there is user, get a single user, and then we can see what this user contains. Like say it has ID, email address, and I think this is not a single user. This is all users. So yeah, so you see ID, email, username, password. We have all the information which we need to display and update. So there is an update API call as well. So we don't have to create our own API. In Angular, now we have two types of forms. So we have reactive forms and we have template driven forms. In my course on Free Code Camp, I have actually spoken about both, but here we'll be using reactive forms. I mean, so believe me, there is no like which is if reactive forms is best or template driven forms is best. Both are equally good. I mean, they use at the end similar APIs under the hood. Some people prefer reactive forms, some people prefer template driven forms, and my personal choice is using template driven forms. So in template driven forms, we actually create all the entire form in our backend. I mean, in our TS file, not the backend. I'm just talking about in here. If I say sometime backend, it means my TypeScript files. Just don't get confused, even though it is not backend, to be frank. So we write all the forms in TypeScript files, and then we just like render the form. To create that, we will create a new library. Let's go ahead and do that. So for user information and everything, we will create a different different library, and then we will use that library to have all the information about this particular user. And let's go ahead and create this library. So I'll choose, I want to create a new library, and I don't know why this NX is giving me some hard time. NX console generate UI. Okay, anyways, so we can use CLI to create a new library. Sorry, you can say npx next generate uh, library, and my library name is user. This command should create a new library. We have some defaults set. Let's see. Yeah, so it is asking whether I want to create Angular library or NX Angular library, NXJS library, or schematic Angular. But I have to verify one more thing before I go ahead and say yes. I want my all Angular component to be standalone, even my libraries to be standalone. So I'll just add few flags here before I go ahead and do that. So I'll just add here standalone true. I want it to be true, not false. And similarly, I want my component to be standalone as well. So let's go ahead and run this command now, and we will choose an X Angular, right? Hmm, what's wrong with Prettier? Okay, so yep, an X Angular library. Great. So let's see what we have here: user, src, lib, and this is a standalone component. You can see actually this does not contain any Angular module. And then it's okay, something went wrong. Okay. I was disconnected for a few seconds. Someone noticed that? I mean, is it looks like my internet? Great. So we got our user screen, and what else we need is we need another component which will be if I was not clear. We will create one screen. We have all the information like username, password, which we can get from the API, and it's a static API, right? So it's fixed. So we don't have to worry about username and password. You can actually do the same thing and just make it work. So to do that, we will create now a component and next generate. So let's do open in integrated terminal. So the new library gets created here. So I'll say nx generate component, and we want a login component. I'll pass standalone just to make sure that standalone components gets created. And what did I miss? Yeah, I missed npx. So here G is short for generate and C is short for component. I mean, in case you have been using Angular CLI, you already know that. But in case you are a new developer who never did Angular, I mean, that's what it means. So let's go ahead and create a new Angular component, which is standalone. And we have our login component here. So far, okay, this is strange. Let's see how our app looks like. Localhost 4200. So far this is what we have done. Like we have products and then we have filters based on this product, and then we did view cart last time, and now we need login as well. So it means we have to create another route for login. So let's go ahead and do that. So this is where we are adding all the routes so far. So we can go to src app routes, and we can add one more. Let's go ahead and Pankaj. So yeah, Pankaj has a question. What does okay? Sorry, I'm sure I'm getting some issue with my internet. It's I mean it's fluctuating somehow. So Pankaj, to answer your question, so in Angular 14 and above, we used to have a module, Angular module, whenever we want to create a component. So it was not like that you can just create a component and you can use it anywhere else. With introduction of standalone component, which was in Angular 14, it was in developer preview. So developer preview means you can go ahead and use it, but it's not stable, or it can change. The APIs can change. With Angular 15, it became stable, and so you can go ahead and use standalone component. So you don't have to create an Angular module. You can just create a component, and a standalone component has this characteristics. That's how you can actually identify if it's a standalone component or not. So standalone component generally has this standalone flag true, which is I think in Angular 17 it will become by default standalone. So whenever you create a new component, it will be standalone by default. Right now it's not. So you have to pass a flag whenever you create a component saying make it standalone. So it will not. You can actually go ahead and use it anywhere without adding this to an Angular module. Also, in Angular module, we used to have like an imports array where we used to add all the components and all the modules which we want to use. With standalone, you can still go ahead and use any Angular module. You just have to add them into this imports array. So we'll see, of course, we will add few modules into this imports array. So as we move ahead, but I think that answers your question. Your question was what does standalone component means? Yes, this is what standalone component is. And it enabled few more APIs. For example, we used to do load children to lazy load. Now you can see load component. You don't have to pass module. And in this means it will certainly available for all the modules to use it. You have to add them into imports array. So rather than actually just adding it to declaration, as we used to do earlier, we have to add that into imports array now. So let's see login component. But you don't have to like have one more Angular module and then import, then add it. You just have to just add that particular component. So login component, and let's import this login component, which is yeah. So we added this, but you can see it is giving me some errors because we forgot to do one more thing, which is exporting this component. So it's export star from user slash, no, it's login, right? So it's login slash login component. And it should work now. So login component, login component. And now what we will do is we will do one more thing. We will just redirect our users to login by default. So we can say, okay, path. So if you remember, we added this one earlier, and we now rather than product, we can say, okay, redirect to login. So login becomes our default page. And let's go back, and we should see login works. Login works. Yeah. So that's what we got right now. And now let's go back and do some forms, because of course to enter user information, I mean login and password, you need a form. You need to have a form where user will enter the information. So let's talk a little bit about forms. So in Angular, there are two types. As I said, reactive forms and template driven. We are going to use reactive forms. To use reactive forms, you have to take something from Angular, right? Angular has all these libraries, or you can say, yeah, libraries available already as part of the framework. One of them is forms. And to use reactive forms, we will add reactive forms module. And in case you want to use template driven forms, you just have to add forms module. And that's it. Once we add reactive forms module, I get access to all the APIs which we can go ahead and use to create our form. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's start if I talk about forms, what we have roles. And mhm, are you facing some issue at your end as well? I mean, are you able to see some fluctuation where my internet just disconnects for a few seconds? Anyone? Okay, let me verify. Because I can see there is fluctuation. Okay. Okay, that's strange. That's strange. I mean, I'm generally my internet doesn't give me any issue, but let's see. Speed test. May have to restart my router. Okay, download speed looks okay. or because it's Friday. And upload speed is 30 to 35, which is good for SD streaming. I don't know. Probably it's just temporary issue. Great. So let's so where I was, yeah. Uh, if you talk about form, actually what you have inside form, it's controls, right? So let's start with the control. Let's see how you can create a control, and then eventually we will go till the form. So let's see. So as I said, in reactive forms, we create our form in TypeScript file. Yeah, yes, Pankaj. I mean, it's good. I'm just wondering why it is just giving me an issue. So to create a control in template driven or using the template driven API which we have, or sorry, not the template driven reactive forms API which we have, you can create a control, just a control. I'm not talking about like entire form. So let's say I have a search control. So I can do a new form control, and I can start with an empty value. So I can say, hey, this form control doesn't have any value to start with. I mean, I can you can also pass some text here which will be displayed in the control, but fine, fine BPS. I mean, where you stay, Pankaj. So we just created our control, and let's see how we can bind this control. To bind this control, you have, of course, we can use input tag, right? This is how we create controls. Type, I would say text, placeholder, let's say search text. And this is interesting. So here we have to say, hey, I already have this form control. So go ahead and bind this to this form control. Uh, is equals to, so my form control is search. And once we do this, let's see what happens. And we should see search text here, and let's see enter some information. But what forms enables you to do? So forms enables you to have two-way data binding as well. It means whatever information I have entered into text should be available as soon as I enter the values. To do that, oh, Himachal, that's it's very beautiful, Himachal. I mean, I want to be there once. Let's see when. Search value. I couldn't visit when I was in India, and yeah. You can see when I enter the values, I'm able to see the value here. So what I'm accessing here, I'm accessing something called search.value. Is this something related to Angular? The answer is no. So this is HTML. So any HTML control will have this will have some properties. So we have a property called value, but there is more. We have errors. We have valid, invalid, pristine, dirty. There are a lot of things, a lot of properties. We'll talk about it once we go to the form. But I just wanted to introduce you like how you can actually just have a simple control without even having the entire form, and you can still go ahead and access these values in your HTML template and even in your TypeScript code. So let's now see how we can create a form. When I talk about form, a form will have multiple controls. Of course, a form can have a single property as well, but here you can see, I mean, that's not needed. In case you just have one single control, you can just submit it without a form as well, right? You can just have a button and then just click on of that button. You can just submit the form. But if you have a form and a control, it makes a difference because forms has some characteristics. For example, on enter, I should be able to submit the form. That's something which you can do, as well, but like you have to add those characteristics to a button. Here you can just, with form, it's enabled by default. Let's create our form. So I'll say this is login form, and how we can create a form. So of course we need some APIs from TypeScript, from Angular. So we will be using form group API, and I don't know, I have the search here, the form group, and then we can have here username and we can have a password, and this is how our form looks like. Let's save this and see what we have here. So if I say this is a form, I mean it should have some characteristics already available, some properties already available. Because if I go to a form, I mean form has a value, it has errors, there are some properties which should be available. So let's see that. Login form dot, you can see we have value, we have status, untouched, touched. All these are actually properties of a form. So it means actually our form is ready. And I can just do right now value and pipe JSON. Let's see what we get here. So we have username and password. It means, okay, you have a form, you have two controls available within your form. And let's go ahead and use it. And, or yeah, uh, sorry, I was just closing some pop-ups. So we have to tell our HTML forms. I mean, I'm sure everyone have learned a little bit of HTML and knows how to do HTML because we are going to use form, and everyone knows what form is, right? In case you have learned about HTML. So here, the only difference is we are going to tell tell form, HTML form that, oh, hey, don't create a new instance of form. I already have a form. And the way you can do it using form group directive. So this form group directive, we bind it to our form, which is created already. So here, this login form is created, and we just bind it here, and we say, hey, this is the form, and you have to bind all the controls inside this form. So if I try to bind any control which does not exist inside this form, it will throw an error. So this is like taken care by the Angular uh, form library. So we have login form, and then we create two controls. So you can see it as type text, which is username, type text, type password, and the other control is password. You can see a small difference here. So when I had a single control, I had to bind form control equals to search. But when I'm saying it is for a form group, I'm saying form control name, and which is the same name as the control inside this. So form group, username, password. So our form is ready. Let's talk about few properties of the form, and then we move ahead. So here we enter any values, and you can see you are able to see the value here, username and password, and both the values are available in the control. But let's talk about few more properties, which is very important, and you should remember those properties. And let's say valid status and no, login form dot scene 30. One more thing, I'll say, okay, this is 30, this is scene, this is status of the form, this is valid state, I mean valid, invalid. And I'll just do one more thing. I'll just add some breaks here so it's easy to figure out which value is which. And I need a touched, untouched, and I think there is something errors we can ignore right now. Let's go ahead and see. So we want to talk about all these properties before we go ahead. So we can see, okay, there are few values you can see here. So it says invalid. So it means my form status is invalid false. It means it's valid, which is true. So if I have printed invalid, yeah, here it is. So it says my form status is valid. But what kind of status? What is valid status and invalid status? It's related to the validations. So we'll add validations and we'll see these values. It is form status, the entire form status. And then you have pristine, dirty, touched, and touched. We have to talk about these properties before we go ahead and add few more things to our form. So what you mean by pristine and what you mean by dirty? So let's click on this controls. So you can see something changed. Let's refresh this. So let's refresh and see what changed actually. So as soon as I click here, nothing happens. But when I click outside, it says this this touch property becomes true. It means this form has been touched by my user. And this property changes only once. If it is touched, I mean, you can, of course, do it programmatically. You can actually revert the status back to touched, back to untouched. But once your user interacts, they cannot do anything until unless you give them some mechanism to make it untouched again. Same with pristine and dirty. So let's click on both and nothing happened. But let's enter something. You can see pristine becomes false and dirty becomes true. It means at this point, my user also interacted with the controls. He entered something. And once I remove this, it doesn't mean that my status becomes dirty becomes false. It becomes true and that's it. Until unless, of course, we reset the form, it will be dirty. And you can do a lot of things on this status. So you can figure out if your user interacted with your control, and then you might have seen on some forms, right, where it says, hey, you have some untouched unsaved values, and then you're wondering how it happened, right? Probably you entered something and then you tried to remove the value, or you entered something and then you are trying to move away. So those are the scenarios we can actually handle by using these properties. But remember, these properties will only change once until unless we like do it forcefully. uh, so let's go ahead and do one more thing. Let's submit the form. So we will use ng submit, which is an event, right, created by Angular to work with the form. And then on ng submit, I'll say, okay, hey, what you should do is just log in. And on login, let's see, we'll go to here and add a login function. And we can see just right now, we can just print the values. So we can say, hey, console.log, login form.value. So whatever values we enter will be logged to the console. And let's enter username, password, and let's see the console, login, and we have the value. So we got our values, whatever we entered into our console, and let's design a form a little bit, right? I mean, this form looks very raw. I mean, of course, I'm not a designer myself. I'm not that good at CSS, and I can copy paste CSS and make it work. So to to design this form, we will use Angular material. And I have already this page open here. So we can see something called inputs and Angular material. This is how it looks like. I mean, the Angular material controls or material UI. So what we need here is we need few things. First we need to import the API, right, which we are going to use. And to add any Angular module, now as we have standalone component, you have to add it into imports array. So we'll say, okay, I need mat input module. And with mat input module, you also need one more thing, because let's say if I go to this overview and click here, we also use mat form field. So it means we need mat form field API as well. So we'll just add this import. So now we can go ahead and create a form. And I'm going to use a button. So I'll be, let's go. Yeah, I mean, that's okay, Pankaj. So because generally we don't explore the city where we live. I mean, I lived my almost entire life, not entire life. I mean, yeah, half of my life in Mumbai, and I've never been to many places in Mumbai itself. Because in Mumbai, you just for travel to your work and then you're tired and you don't want to do anything anyways. So matrix button. So I'll just go ahead and add matrix button to our HTML. And we also need the API. So and it was the same when I lived in Pune. I mean, I couldn't explore much of 3 years. There was COVID, so of course. So let's see how our form looks like. I mean, at least we should see the button. Yep, this button looks nice, right? I mean, at least it has some color, and you should have color in your life, right? not my dialogues basically. So let's see. Let's add the form controls now, and let's go back to input, and we will add mat form field here, and let's move this control to this, and then we have to add mat input. So we can add mat input. Not And if you want, you can add mat label as well, which is you can see here favorite food. Like this is the label in case if you want to. And what you do, Pankaj, and I can say okay, mat input. Mumbai is very fast-paced city, and we got this one. See how it looks like at this point. Yep. So little bit better, right? I mean, we see this is material input, and it looks a little bit better than what this control is. So let's see what else we can do. So we can, of course, copy few more CSS from Angular documentation, material documentation, and we can just put this into our CSS file. Let's go back, open the CSS file. I'm using SAS, so and then I can say okay, this form can apply here. I can say okay, class this one. Oh, you are an Angular developer. Happy to see you. And where you work. So username and password. Yeah, let's enter the values and click on login. And we got username and password again. If you're wondering how I got this one password, because it is able to identify that this is a login page somehow, and it is asking me whether I want to autofill the username and password. So I don't want to. Just stay away. Username and password. Yeah, I got my username and password working, and we are missing one. What we are missing here. So let's see. I can just go ahead and remove this, submit, and I'm still able to submit the form. Yay! So I can actually just enter nothing and then make my API call. So generally at this point we have uh, validation. So let's add validation. You work in Ludhiana. Oh, you work in Ludhiana. Nice. So are you enjoying working from home, or you love going to the office? I mean, yeah, uh, there's always some debate happening. You should work from office, you should work from home. I mean, what's your call? So let's add some validation. And in HTML5 there are some validations which is available: required, min length, min max. And with Angular also, of course, Angular has to make those APIs available as well, right? So you can add validation here, because I'm creating my controls on my TypeScript. So I should not go ahead and add validations at the HTML, because I should be able to do it dynamically or programmatically whenever needed. So to accommodate that, Angular has a utility, right? Or you can say it's a bunch of helper function. So there is a class called validators. So this is where you should remember that there is validators class and there is a validator interface. Validator interface is used in case you want to implement your own validation. Validators class already has some built-in helper function. So let's go ahead and add some validation. Let's say, okay, this validators and how you can add validation. So let's put a comma here. So you can see this API is giving me some options. So it says the first is value, which I entered blank. And it says, okay, there is something called form control status of string, which which we'll talk about later. And then second property, it says there is some validator or options. So it says, okay, you can pass form control options, validator function array, and then you have async validator, which we'll explore later on. So it means I can just go ahead and say validators dot required here. So I can add my validation. So this is required validation. So let's start with one, and we will explore more validator functions which exist. So let's go back, and here let's do username password and submit works. Let's remove, and let's remove, and let's click on login, and again it works. So I added the validation, but again I'm able to submit the values without doing anything. With an empty form. But you can see something. You can see there's something which is noticeable right now. It's this controls. So it's red. So this is what you get with Angular material, because Angular material knows that in case your control is invalid, your form should look like this. So this is the default behavior. You don't have to do anything. And this why I love using Angular material, because most of things are taken care by the UI control itself. I don't have too much. So it is telling you that your control is invalid, but I'm still able to submit the form. So this is where some of the APIs or some of the properties of form will come handy here. So you see, we talked about valid and invalid. So what you mean by valid is when I have my all the forms controls uh, validation satisfied, then it is true. In that case, invalid will be false. But in case I don't satisfy all the validations, it means my form status will be invalid status will be true and valid status will be false. So this is where we can actually go ahead and use this invalid property to make our form disabled until and unless we enter the value. Easy, right? I mean, so let's go ahead and use it. So I can say login form dot invalid. So I can say, hey, make this button disabled, and but till when? So make this button disabled until and unless my login form is invalid. Pankaj, I love working from office at home. I get bored since my job is in Chennai and there's not much to do. Uh, okay, I mean, Pankaj, you're still young, so I can totally understand this. But to me, I mean, of course, I can never see myself going back to office. I mean, I've traveled for 11 years. I think I'm done. I've done enough of this office shit. So, but yeah, I mean, I do agree with some people's point of view that okay, early in your career, you need more people to interact with, you need more people to talk with, especially experienced people, right? So you learn something from them. And yeah, here, so now we are able to submit the form with valid values, right? So if I don't have valid value, I see some error. I mean, not see some error, but I see my login button is disabled. But there is again, let's add few more APIs, right? So we have some more validation options, and we see how we can add multiple. So we saw only we can add one. Do work from home. I work from home. So Pankaj, I have been working from home since 2020. So it's been close to 3 years now. And yeah. So I mean, I live in Germany. So it's a city nearby Hamburg where I live right now. So I can add a few more validators. I can say, okay, validators.email. I mean, I'm sure everyone knows the email validation. And similarly, let's add few more validation for password. So nowadays, I mean, if you see, you go to any website where you want to create your password, it says, hey, your password should be minimum this, maximum that, and it should have this character, that character. Of course, you can go ahead and do that here. But let's add few more and let's add the minimum 8 character and maximum 16 character. So I can say, hey, validators, just give me min length of 8 and again, I'll say, hey, validators, give me max length of 16. So I'm just adding this validations right now. Let's see what happens here. Let's enter username, let's enter password, and you see we do have form, we do have validation, but there is one thing which we are doing wrong. How the user should know that what needs to be entered, right? So of course it's purely based on guess. So if I somehow ended up doing or writing that, okay, it should be writing an email, I mean, then it becomes enabled. So we should give your users, or our users, some hint, some information that what's wrong with this form. I mean, if I remove this, I mean, I should be able to tell, I should tell my users that, hey, your password, your email, sorry, username should be email. Same here, right? So if I enter less than eight characters, I should tell my users that, oh, password should be minimum 8 characters and maximum 16 characters. But we are not actually doing anything. So at this point, we should actually learn how to add the errors to your controls. Let's see how we can do that. Something called mat error. Of course, I will reach out to Angular Material again, and Angular Material has a very nice control for errors. I think it should be available on my APIs somewhere. This errors, yeah, this is error. So let's see. Mat error. This is what I need. So I can add mat error, and let's see how we can add. So we can say, hey, give me. So if my form has an error, but on which control? So I have to pass a second parameter here, has error. Second parameter is my control name, and that's it. So if I'm saying if my form has an error of email type on this particular control, which is username, let's go ahead and say, hey, please enter in a valid email address, or we can say the username uh, should be an valid email address. Let's see how it looks like. So enter and then click outside and says, hey, the username should be valid email address. Now we are doing the correct thing, right? We are telling our users that, but hey, I mean, you entered something wrong, and actually this field is actually should be a valid email address. And there is one interesting thing which is happening here. So if you enter something, I mean, you see this error which comes here. You see some small animation. You don't have to do that. I mean, you don't have to write that code to actually validate or add this animation. By default, done by Angular Material for you. So that's one. Again, I mean, there's another cool thing about any Angular Material, because as I said, I mean, I'm not that good at CSS. I cannot just go ahead and add this animation by myself. So I love this. I mean, the way it looks like. Let's add the similar thing to password. So here, now I have to say password, right, rather than username. And then here, the error is different. So error is min length, only NPTH. And in this case, I will say, in case it is a min length error, so I'll say the password should be at least 8 character long. And if it is max length, and then I can say the password should be at most 16 characters long, right? I mean, I cannot go beyond 16. And let's format the document and save this. Let's enter a valid email address, and then let's enter a password which is not 8 characters, and let's say, hey, it should be 8 character. And we enter 8 character, but as soon as we go beyond 16, it says, hey, the password should be at most 16 characters long. So we are able to display the proper validation message to our end user. And this is what we can achieve using Angular Material. So we did everything using Angular Material. We used mat input, we used mat form field, we used mat button, we used mat error, and we can also have something nice which is called mat hint. So here, this will be always visible. So username is your email. Just in case, I mean, you have your account on 10 different websites and you don't know if you have a custom username or you have email, so you can do that. So you can see this hint is by default enabled. I think I added it in on below the password, but this will be always active. So, and I think it's something. Mhm. Here, email is required. Mm, so, and we can add some errors. I think mm, that's okay. So we just move this above. We can keep it here. Great. So now we have our validation messages. We created our login form, and we have some nice animation as well, thanks to Angular material. Right? We don't have to do that. What else? What else we should be doing right now? So because I don't have any enough time to start a new topic, so I think we should wrap up today. So we got our login form working. We have to make an API call and all those things, which we will do on our next stream, which is on Monday. We don't have anything tomorrow. I'm just doing this stream because I did believe me, I was just talking to myself for an hour yesterday, and then I realized that there is no voice. So I had to delete that video. So thank you again, everyone, for joining. Thank you, Pankaj, for joining and having a nice conversation here. And in case you want some specific topics to be covered, just let me know. I mean, I'm on Twitter and LinkedIn. You can always DM me. And if you need to talk about something else related to Angular, related to technology, feel free to DM me. So, and have a very nice Sunday. Pankaj, so you work for a German company. Yes, Pankaj, I work for a German company, and the life is nice. I mean, I've been traveling since I've joined this company, so I have been traveling a lot. I'm speaking at multiple conferences, and my employer loves supporting me doing that. So yeah, I mean, uh, and like speaking is my passion. So yes, Pankaj, so you can actually just go to Santosh Yadav.dev. You will get all the information which you need about myself. I have my Twitter handle, my LinkedIn, my GitHub email. I do have my email here. Okay, cool. But yeah, you can get all this the information here, and feel free to contact. And and thanks again for Pankaj for joining. I know this is very late in India, and probably if you want to join again, we'll continue from here on Monday. We'll implement the API calls, we'll implement the store, and then we'll create our forms for profile information, and then we'll go back to fix or not fix, but we'll add our cart screen as well. Yes, Pankaj, nice to meet you as well. See ya. Bye bye.